Welcome to the FEMolution Podcast. This isn't another finance show about hustling harder, chasing revenue, or glorifying burnout. And it's definitely not another conversation about chasing profit at any cost. This is where we dismantle the systems that told you you had to make more money before you were allowed to protect it. Because at Fem Solutions, we believe in something radically different. Protection comes first, and profit naturally follows. Because real financial power isn't about being rich, it's about being resourced. And on this podcast, we're redefining what financial freedom actually means. And it is not a destination reserved for the wealthy, but it's a daily practice available at any income level when you understand how to manage, protect, and optimize what you already have. We talk about building financial ecosystems, not just profitable businesses, about securing your infrastructure before you scale your income, and creating systems that protect your cash flow, your peace, and your future. You'll hear conversations rooted in FEM's core philosophy: protection first, not profit first, and strong money that supports a soft life, and freedom that's measured by resources, not status. And last but definitely not least, impact that extends beyond your bank account. Because FEM is not here to follow the industry standards. We're here to set a new one. Because we don't just serve clients, we empower change makers. And this podcast is part of that movement. It's part of our empowering process. So if you know your brilliance deserves better support, if you're done building income without infrastructure, and you're ready to stop leaking money, energy, and peace, then you're in the right place. This is the FEMolution Podcast, where we teach you how to do money the Fem way. Savings isn't about having more money. Savings is about having a future that's actually yours. And in FEMFlow, the real question isn't, can I put money aside? The real question is, does my future get a vote in how I'm building today? Because if your future doesn't get a vote, your business becomes a treadmill. You're moving, you're working, you're doing everything you're supposed to, but you're not actually going anywhere. When your future does get a vote, your business stops being a treadmill and becomes a vehicle. And now you're moving towards something, not just away from collapse. Savings is what makes the future reachable. Not perfect, not predictable, reachable. Savings is what keeps you from having to sacrifice tomorrow just to survive today. And that's not a budgeting concept, right? That's a systems decision. Because most people are taught that urgency is just how business works. But urgency isn't neutral. It isn't accidental. And it's not a personal failure. Urgency is the operating condition of the current system. A system that runs on hustle, speed, constant pressure, and self-sacrifice disguised as ambition. In that system, the future is never really funded. It's always promised. That's it. It's a promise. And when the future is only promised and not resourced, your body becomes the backup plan. When your future becomes reachable, 5 things shift almost immediately. You gain more time to breathe, more leverage to choose, more freedom to say no to the wrong things and yes to the right things, more ability to pivot toward what's next, and more change without panic. And that's what makes the future livable and not just theoretical. So today, I'm going to talk to you about 5 things, okay? Then I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to talk to you about the stakes, okay? And then we'll go from there. So the 5 things I'm going to talk to you about are optionality, autonomy, sovereignty, discernment, and the future. And you're going to learn the 3 stakes, the 3 costs, okay? So let's start with optionality. That's thing number 1. It's the first door that opens. Because optionality is how the future stays open. In FEMFlow, optionality means you have choices that are not dictated by fear or scarcity or being compliant. Okay? In your nervous system, optionality feels like space. Space to pause, space to consider, space to decide without rushing. Optionality is what makes the future something you can walk toward, not run from. And that brings us to autonomy, right? Who's actually directing the present? Your present, okay? Autonomy is how the present becomes directive instead of reactive. And in FEMFlow, autonomy means you can choose to move your business forward instead of being forced to move it. In your nervous system, autonomy feels like a breath of fresh air. You're no longer bracing. You're no longer scrambling. You're directing. And autonomy is the difference between operating and overfunctioning. Which brings us to sovereignty. What all of this is pointing towards, okay? Sovereignty is what happens when the future belongs to you, not to chance. So in FEMFlow, sovereignty means your business can expand without consuming you in the process. In your nervous system, sovereignty feels like peace instead of pressure. Not because everything is easy, right? But because nothing is urgent in the wrong way anymore. Sovereignty is the highest form of financial independence you can achieve. Not because you have more money, but because you have more choices. Optionality and autonomy aren't separate from sovereignty. They are how sovereignty is built. Excuse me. Which brings us to discernment, the missing skill that no one teaches. So let's talk about it. Discernment is simple, okay? Discernment is how you decide what belongs to you, what doesn't, and what can wait. So in FEMFlow, think of discernment as the filtration system, right? It keeps the wrong things out and the right things resourced. In your nervous system, discernment feels like knowing without rushing. You don't have to push. You don't have to override yourself. You don't have to say yes to everything just to survive. Discernment is what makes optionality usable and autonomy sustainable so that sovereignty is achievable. Which brings us into the future. Think of it as the shift, okay? Because here's where savings changes everything. When your future is unfunded, okay? Every decision has your nervous system treating time as a threat. And a nervous system under threat doesn't choose, it complies. It does whatever the moment is calling for, right? Because threat creates urgency. And urgency is the quickest way to destroy discernment. When everything feels rushed, you don't decide, okay? You obey. Savings reverses that sequence. Savings moves the future out of your nervous system and into structure. Now you can direct time instead of racing against it. So I'm going to give you some examples. Real life examples, okay? Not theory. All right, I'm going to make this real practical for you. When your future isn't funded, every client feels like a lifeline. Every delay feels like a crisis. Every decision feels urgent. And the present starts to feel like a cage. But when even a small part of your future is funded, you can say no to the wrong project. You can wait for the better client. You can pivot without collapsing. You can repair things and fix them instead of patching them in the moment. And you can plan and direct instead of react. Savings buys time. Time buys discernment. And discernment compounds over time. And that's how autonomy comes into play and becomes sovereignty over time, right? So now I'm going to tell you the stakes. Those 3 costs I talked about earlier. I told you I would talk about, right? We're going to talk about what's actually on the line. Okay. There are 3 costs to staying where you are. There is a personal cost where staying without savings keeps you trapped. Urgency burns your nervous system. And burnout kills your capacity. And remember, self-care is all about capacity protection, asset protection, not allowing you to reach the point of burnout, right? And then there's a business cost. So choosing not to fund the future because you have to put out the fires of today actually removes your optionality. And no optionality means no pivots, no experiments, no expansion, right? No innovation without great risk. And businesses without futures, because their future is not funded, right? Become jobs. So now let's talk about the cost to your identity. Without savings, you stay a worker inside your own company. Workers survive, yes. Operators optimize, but owners choose. And savings is the bridge between operator and owner. Let's talk about the divide that no one names. Okay, so here's the part that most people never say out loud. Not everyone wants ownership. Not everyone wants sovereignty. And there is no shame in that. But if you do want sovereignty, as FEM defines it, you have to fund the future. Savings, right? And the currency for that isn't just discipline, right? And sacrificing in the present. It's direction. It's how the 4S system works. Money comes in and you direct it to survival, stability, self-care, and savings. And that's how the real question isn't how much can I put aside, right? Or can I afford to put anything aside? It's does my future savings get a vote today? So is the money that I'm getting now funding my future in any way? And this is where FEMFlow gets very clear, okay? This is where you have 2 options moving forward. And I'm going to give them to you, okay? Option 1, you can stay an active participant in the current system, the one that requires hustle, urgency, and self-sacrifice in the name of making more money. The system that runs on obedience. Do more, push harder, override yourself, and hope that it pays off someday. Or option 2, you can stand up and leave that system behind. You can adopt one where your money works for you, where your future is funded, your capacity is protected, and your life isn't the collateral. The system that creates optionality, that gives you room to choose, room to breathe, room to build without burning yourself down. So here's the truth, plainly stated, right? Option 1 requires obedience. Option 2 creates optionality. FEMFlow and FEM as a whole, okay, does not tell you which one to choose, but it does tell you the truth about how each one operates. We've officially went over all 4 layers of the 4S FEMFlow framework, or the 4S system, right? Or simply FEMFlow, because that's what this is. It's all about flow, right? Money comes in and it flows through the 4 S's in order of priority. That's why there's an order. It's a sequence, right? It's a money sequencing system. Money comes in, you put what's necessary into survival first, then you put some into stability, then you put some into self-care, then you put some into savings. Every time. That's your money sequence. So everything is being funded. Because remember, survival is not something you outgrow, right? It grows with you. The more money you make, the more your baseline needs increase, right? And once your baseline needs are met, you got to have buffers. You got to give yourself room to breathe. How do you do that? Stability. Putting money in there. Keeping it for when you need it, right? But more important than that, not more important, right? They all work together. But the most important thing, this is where the system kind of flips, okay? Survival and stability, just consider those non-negotiables, right? Those are things we do anyway. But self-care is where we choose how it's going to be moving forward, where we choose to protect our capacity, where we recognize that we are the most valuable asset our business has, and therefore we must be protected. So we decide to protect our capacity so that we can fund our future. So that instead of our business staying a treadmill where we're moving but not getting anywhere, it becomes a vehicle moving us toward a destination, our future, our resourced future. And now that you see how FEMFlow works, right? Next week we'll talk a little more about it. Okay? Next week I'll show you how it's applied, how you can apply it if you choose to adopt the system. All right? Because self-care, right? It made the future safe to imagine. But savings is how you claim it. Not by hustling harder, not by sacrificing more, not by staying on a hamster wheel that someone else built, but by refusing to keep participating in a system that depends on your exhaustion to function. That's not opting out of ambition. That's opting into sovereignty. So if this episode helped savings feel less like deprivation and more like choice, go ahead and follow the FEMolution Podcast on Spotify, because we're here to help you build a future that doesn't require you to abandon yourself in the present to get there. So I'll see you next week when we bring it all together one last time to close out this segment. Okay? Bye.